What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected and composed figures finally loses his legendary calm on live television? When Morgan Freeman, the man whose deep, resonant voice has narrated countless films and documentaries, finds himself in a confrontation so sharp that it pierces his trademark serenity. The moment was nothing short of explosive. Within minutes, clips of the exchange flooded social media, sparking fierce debate and revealing a side of Morgan Freeman the world had never seen. The day began like any other live taping. Bright studio lights bathed the set, and the audience buzzed with anticipation. Morgan Freeman walked onto the stage with his familiar quiet dignity, his presence commanding attention without effort. He exchanged polite greetings with the panelists and eased into conversation. For a while, it was the usual rhythm, talk of his latest project, reflections on his remarkable career, and thoughtful insights that showcased the depth of his artistry. But then, Behar leaned forward. Those who've watched The View long enough recognized the look in her eyes, sharp, probing, and signaling a shift from light conversation to pointed confrontation. "Morgan," she began, her tone edging toward challenge, "you've been very quiet lately about certain social issues. Some people feel that for someone with your influence, that silence is a problem. Do you think you have a responsibility to speak out more?" Freeman didn't respond immediately. He took a measured breath, nodding slightly as if weighing each word before choosing to speak. "Joy," he said evenly, "I've always believed actions speak louder than words. I've spent my career trying to tell stories that matter, stories that reveal something true about the human experience. I don't believe in performing activism for cameras." Before he could continue, Joy cut in. "But isn't that a bit of a cop-out?" she pressed. "You have millions who respect you. When you stay silent, aren't you using your privilege to avoid difficult conversations?" The word privilege seemed to hang in the air like a spark. Freeman's jaw tightened ever so slightly. His reply came smooth but firm, steel beneath velvet. "Privilege," he repeated. "That's an interesting word, especially coming from someone who sits in a studio making millions, telling others what to think and say." The crowd stirred. This wasn't the Morgan Freeman they knew. The calm storyteller was gone, replaced by a man who had clearly reached his limit. Joy straightened, her expression sharpening. "I'm not the one with your level of fame," she retorted. "I'm not the voice of God in movies. You have a unique power, Morgan." "And you," Freeman countered, his voice rising slightly though still composed, "have a different kind of power. You sit here every day with a microphone, telling millions how to see the world. Don't pretend you're powerless. You shape narratives. You decide who gets grace and who gets crucified in the court of public opinion." The tension was electric. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. Whoopi Goldberg began to interject, but Joy raised a hand, determined to continue. "So what you're saying," she challenged, "is that you think I'm the problem? That asking you to use your voice for good is somehow an attack?" "I'm saying," Freeman replied, and now his voice carried unmistakable fire, "that you don't get to decide what using my voice for good looks like. You don't get to sit in judgment of how I contribute to my community or engage with the world. The idea that silence equals complicity is a false dichotomy. It's used to bully people into performing for your approval." Joy's face flushed. "Bully?" she shot back. "You think I'm bullying you right now?" Freeman leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "I think you're doing what you always do, creating a no-win situation. If I don't say what you want me to say, in the way you want me to say it, then I've failed your moral test. That's not discourse, Joy, that's manipulation." The audience was silent. The atmosphere was thick with tension, every word landing with precision and weight. It was a moment of raw honesty, an unfiltered clash between conviction and control, between moral expectation and personal boundaries. For perhaps the first time in his long and distinguished career, Morgan Freeman wasn't just narrating the story, he was at the center of one. And in that silence that followed, it was clear. Even the calmest voices, when pushed too far, can thunder. What started as a routine interview quickly spiraled into one of the most intense and revealing exchanges live television had seen in years. The atmosphere on set was charged. What began as polite conversation between two strong personalities turned raw, unscripted, and emotionally charged. Joy Behar leaned back slightly, gathering herself. Her expression made it clear she wasn't backing down. "I'm asking legitimate questions, Morgan," she said pointedly. "If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." Freeman's voice dropped lower, each word deliberate and powerful. "Uncomfortable?" he repeated. "Joy, I've been uncomfortable my entire life. I've navigated systems designed to keep me out. I've worked 3 times as hard for half the recognition. I've smiled through interviews where people ask questions they'd never ask white actors. Don't talk to me about uncomfortable. What does make me uncomfortable are people like you. People who think the only valid activism is the loud, performative kind that gets headlines and applause. That's completely unfair," Joy fired back, her tone rising to match his. "I've spent my career speaking truth to power, calling out injustice wherever I see it. If you can't handle being asked direct questions, maybe you shouldn't come on shows like this." Freeman gave a short, almost bitter laugh. "Speaking truth to power?" he echoed. "Is that what you think you're doing right now?" "I'm not power, Joy. I'm a 70-something-year-old actor who's tried to live decently and do good work. Power is in boardrooms, in political offices, in the systems that actually oppress people. But it's easier to come after someone like me, someone who shows up and answers your questions, because that gets you your viral moment. Real power doesn't sit in these chairs and let you take shots at it." The tension was thick enough to cut. The other hosts shifted nervously. Sonny Hostin tried to interject. "Maybe we should all take a breath here." But neither Joy nor Morgan seemed ready to step back. "You're deflecting," Joy said, leaning forward again. "You're making this about me instead of answering the question. Why won't you use your platform more actively? Why won't you speak out?" Freeman's voice quieted, but the intensity sharpened. "Because I don't believe that constant commentary equals meaningful action. I don't believe tweeting about every issue makes you an activist. I don't believe that performing wokeness for cameras changes lives. I believe in doing the work, supporting causes quietly, letting my actions speak. But that doesn't fit your narrative, does it? That doesn't give you the soundbite you're chasing." Joy's eyes flashed with anger. "Soundbite? You think this is about me getting a soundbite? I'm trying to have a real conversation about responsibility, about what it means to have influence and whether we have an obligation to use it. And I'm telling you," Freeman said, his composure fraying, "you don't get to define what that obligation looks like for me, or for anyone else. You sit in an echo chamber surrounded by people who think just like you. And you've convinced yourself that anyone who doesn't perform activism your way is morally deficient. That's not enlightenment, Joy. That's arrogance." The word hit like a thunderclap. Whoopi Goldberg finally spoke, her voice steady but firm. "Okay, let's everybody take it down a notch." But Joy wasn't done. "Arrogance?" she shot back. "You come on this show, accept the invitation, sit in that chair, and then act like you're above being asked questions, like your choices shouldn't be examined." Freeman's tone softened, but the pain behind it was unmistakable. "My choices have been examined my entire life, Joy. Every role, every word, every decision has been scrutinized, dissected, and judged by people who think they know better. And you know what? I'm tired of it. I'm tired of people who believe that holding a microphone gives them the moral right to interrogate others who don't march to their drum." "People like me?" Joy repeated, seizing on his words. "What exactly do you mean by that, Morgan? Be careful. You sound like you're about to say something you'll regret." "I mean people," Freeman said firmly, "who've built careers on outrage. People who wake up every morning searching for something to be offended by, someone to call out, some new crusade to champion, from the comfort of a TV studio. You want to talk about privilege? That's privilege. The privilege of playing activist without ever having to do the hard, unglamorous work of real change." Sarah Haynes finally spoke, her voice calm but tense. "Maybe what Morgan's trying to say," she offered gently, "is that there are different ways to make a difference, different ways to contribute. But by then, the damage was done." The audience sat frozen, torn between awe and disbelief. What had begun as an interview had become something far more powerful, a raw, unfiltered clash between two people who both believed they were right. What began as a heated discussion had now erupted into something far more personal. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut. Every word, every pause, every glance between Morgan Freeman and Joy Behar carried the weight of years of frustration, both professional and ideological. When Sarah Haynes gently tried to de-escalate the growing storm, Joy immediately cut her off. "No, Sarah," she snapped. "Let him finish. Let Morgan tell us all how we're doing activism wrong. Please, enlighten us." Her tone dripped with sarcasm. Freeman's response came swift and sharp. "You want me to enlighten you? Fine. Real activism isn't about cameras or applause. It's showing up when no one's watching. It's writing checks to organizations that actually help people. It's mentoring, creating opportunities, making those small, consistent choices that build real change. It's work, actual difficult, sustained work. Not attacking people on TV because they don't tweet enough for your liking." Joy's temper broke through her composure. "You think I don't do that work?" She fired back, voice rising. "You think because you don't see it on television it doesn't happen? You have no idea what I do, what causes I support, what I give my time to. How dare you come on here and make assumptions about my life and my choices?" "How dare I?" Freeman's voice now thundered to meet hers, his calm completely shattered. "You started this, Joy. You invited me under the pretense of discussing my work, and then ambushed me with accusations about my silence, my privilege, my responsibility. You created this confrontation because that's what gets clicks, what gets ratings, what keeps you relevant. And now you're offended that I'm defending myself?" The audience sat frozen. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a collision of egos and philosophies, raw and unscripted. Alyssa Farah Griffin cautiously interjected, trying to mediate. "I think both of you are making valid points here," she said. "Maybe we can agree that there's room for different approaches." But Joy wasn't interested in compromise. Shaking her head, her jaw set, she shot back, "No, Alyssa. I don't think both of us are making valid points. I think Morgan came here with a chip on his shoulder looking for a fight. And he found one. I asked a simple question about using his platform, and he turned it into a personal attack on me, on this show, on everything I do. That's not discourse. That's defensive deflection." "Defensive deflection?" Freeman repeated, leaning forward, his presence filling the room. "No, Joy, you don't get to gaslight me on live television. You asked a loaded question designed to corner me, and when I refused to play along, you twisted it into me being the aggressor. That's a tactic, and it's one people like you have used against people like me for decades." "People like you," Joy echoed, eyes narrowing. "You keep saying that. What exactly do you mean?" "I mean people who don't fit neatly into your boxes," Freeman replied firmly. "People who refuse to be tokens, who won't perform identity politics the way you want them to. You want every successful person of color to validate your worldview, to be proof that you're on the right side of history. And when we don't comply, you feel betrayed like we owe you something." Joy's face went red. "That is completely out of line. I've never expected anyone to validate me. I ask questions, that's my job. If you can't handle questions without turning them into some conspiracy about identity politics, maybe you're not as evolved as you think you are." "Evolved," Freeman said, bitterness in his tone. "There it is. The suggestion that if I don't agree with you, I'm somehow backward. That's the kind of intellectual condescension I'm talking about. You've decided you're right, and anyone who disagrees is ignorant or unenlightened." Whoopi Goldberg, clearly frustrated, tried again. "Morgan, Joy, we need to bring this back to a respectful place." But Joy pressed on, her voice tight with anger. "Respect? You want to talk about respect? You've done nothing but disrespect me since this started. You've called me arrogant, manipulative, and accused me of not being a real activist. And now you want to talk about respect?" Freeman's reply was quiet but searing. "I've told you the truth, Joy. I've told you how your approach comes across to those who don't already agree with you. I've given you feedback you may not want to hear, but desperately need to. The question is, are you capable of receiving it? Or are you so wrapped up in your own righteousness that any criticism just bounces off?" Joy let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "My righteousness," she repeated, her voice shaking now, part fury, part disbelief. The audience was silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Two powerful figures, once models of control and composure, had dropped all pretense. What remained was pure, unfiltered confrontation, each defending not just their words, but their very sense of self. "That's rich," Joy shot back, her tone dripping with irony. "Coming from someone who just spent 10 minutes lecturing me about the right way to do activism, the right way to use a platform, the right way to engage with the world. You don't even hear your own righteousness, Morgan. You don't realize how condescending you sound." Morgan paused, the tension in the studio thick enough to cut. Then, to everyone's surprise, he nodded slightly. "Maybe I do sound condescending," he admitted, the hint of vulnerability cracking through his otherwise composed demeanor. "But Joy, so do you. That's what I've been trying to tell you. You ask questions from a place of assumed moral superiority. You frame your challenges as if guilt is already proven. And when someone pushes back, when someone refuses to play along, you act like you're the victim in a confrontation you started." Joy opened her mouth to fire back, but Morgan wasn't finished. His voice deepened, carrying the weight of years spent under public scrutiny. "I've been doing this for more than 50 years. I've sat in countless interview chairs, answered every kind of question, smiled through every kind of insult. I've seen the culture shift, some for the better, some not. But somewhere along the way, we lost something important. We lost the ability to disagree without demonizing. We forgot how to listen to criticism without taking it as an attack. Now everything is performance, performing values, performing outrage. And if you don't perform enthusiastically enough, you're branded as part of the problem." The studio fell silent. Even Joy hesitated, her expression unreadable. Morgan continued, his tone softening from anger to reflection. "You asked me why I don't speak out more. Here's your answer. Because the moment you speak, people expect perfection. One wrong word, one imperfect opinion, and suddenly you're canceled, branded problematic. So some of us choose to do the work quietly. We write checks, mentor others, build opportunities, without having to constantly prove our moral worth to the crowd." Joy found her voice again, though it carried less fire than before. "That's not fair, Morgan. Accountability isn't perfection. Asking people with influence to use it responsibly isn't control, it's responsibility." Morgan leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "But where's the line, Joy? Where's the line between accountability and control? Between responsibility and performance? Between activism and virtue signaling? Because from where I sit, that line's been blurred beyond recognition. People are so afraid of being misunderstood that they either stay silent or say only what's expected. Neither of those paths leads to real change," Sunny Hostin interjected gently, her tone thoughtful. "But Morgan, don't you think that discomfort, the fear of saying the wrong thing, comes from a good place? From people finally realizing that words have impact?" "Sometimes," Morgan admitted, turning to her. "But sometimes it comes from something darker. From mob mentality. From the thrill of tearing others down. From a culture addicted to outrage and judgment. And Joy," he turned back to her, "I'm not blaming you personally. But shows like this, they feed that culture. They thrive on conflict and controversy. On catching people in contradictions instead of exploring understanding." Joy's expression softened, though her defenses still flickered in her eyes. "So what would you have us do, Morgan? Stop asking hard questions? Stop challenging people? Just let everyone say whatever they want without pushback?" "No," Morgan said, his voice quieter now, heavy with fatigue. "Ask hard questions. But do it with curiosity, not judgment. Create space for nuance. Recognize that disagreement isn't moral failure and silence isn't complicity. There's more than one path toward progress, and yours isn't the only valid one." For a long moment, the set was utterly still. The energy that had crackled with hostility now hung heavy with contemplation. The other hosts exchanged uncertain glances, unsure how to bridge the silence that followed such raw honesty. Finally, Whoopi spoke, her voice calm but weighted with experience. "You know," she said slowly, "I think what we just saw is exactly what real conversation looks like. Messy, uncomfortable, but maybe necessary." Morgan exhaled softly, his expression unreadable. Joy looked down at her notes, then back up at him. Her anger cooled into something quieter, almost thoughtful. For once, the usual applause cue didn't come. The audience, like the hosts, seemed suspended between reflection and respect. The cameras kept rolling, but for that brief moment, it no longer felt like television. It felt like truth. I think what we're all circling around here, Whoopi began carefully, her tone measured, is that these are complicated issues without easy answers. Morgan, you've made powerful points about performative activism and the constant pressure to comment on everything. And Joy, you've made valid points about the responsibility that comes with having a platform and a voice people listen to. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe, Morgan said slowly, though his voice carried skepticism. He turned toward Joy, his expression softening slightly. Joy, I don't think you're a bad person, he said. I don't think you're trying to do harm. But I do think you're so convinced you're right that you've stopped hearing when someone tries to tell you something important. That kind of certainty, it's dangerous. It shuts down real conversation. It turns potential allies into enemies. And right now, we need more unity, not division. Joy was quiet for a moment, visibly steadying herself. When she finally spoke, her tone was composed but unyielding. I hear what you're saying, Morgan. I really do. But I won't apologize for asking hard questions. I won't apologize for expecting more from people who hold power and influence. And I can't pretend that silence is neutral, not in times like these when silence can be complicity. Morgan nodded slightly but countered with equal conviction. And I can't pretend that taking a stand always requires a public statement. Sometimes taking a stand means doing the work without announcing it. Sometimes it means living your values instead of performing them. The most meaningful battles aren't fought on camera. They happen quietly, in communities, in classrooms, in how we treat one another day to day. The tension in the room was thick, but no longer explosive. Now it carried the weight of two people standing firm on principle. Alyssa Farah Griffin finally spoke up, her voice tentative. Is there any common ground here? Anything you both agree on? Morgan paused, thoughtful, before nodding. I think we both want to see positive change in the world, he said. We both care about justice, fairness, and building a better society. We just disagree on how to get there, on which methods are most effective and what role public figures should play. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't all need to agree on tactics as long as we're aligned on purpose. Joy nodded slowly, though her guard remained up. I can accept that, she said. I can accept that we have different approaches. What I can't accept is being told that my approach is wrong, that asking questions is harmful, or that holding people accountable is manipulation. And what I can't accept, Morgan replied evenly, is being told my way is inadequate. That working quietly means I don't care, that avoiding public performance is cowardice. We've reached an impasse, Joy. We simply see activism and responsibility differently. And maybe neither of us will convince the other today. Whoopi nodded, her voice gentle but steady. At least we're being honest about that, she said. This has been one of the most intense conversations we've ever had on this show, but there's real value in it. People need to see that you can disagree strongly and still listen, still try to understand where the other person's coming from, even if you never fully agree. Morgan exhaled and stood up, the motion deliberate, final. I appreciate the invitation, he said, even if this didn't go how any of us expected. I stand by everything I said. I believe we've created a culture obsessed with performative outrage, and that it's counterproductive. But I also know Joy and everyone here genuinely care about making the world better. We'll just have to agree to disagree about how to do that. Joy rose too, hesitating for a beat before extending her hand. I appreciate you being willing to have this conversation, she said quietly. I don't agree with most of what you said, but I respect that you said it directly instead of hiding behind polite cliches. Morgan took her hand. The handshake was brief, but genuine, and I respect your passion, he replied, even when I think it's misdirected. The world needs people who care enough to ask the tough questions. I just wish those questions came with more openness to answers you might not expect. As Morgan turned and walked off the stage, the audience broke into applause. It was impossible to tell who or what they were applauding. The honesty, the confrontation, or simply the relief that it was over. The hosts sat in silence for a moment before Whoopi faced the camera. Well, she said with a wry smile, that's definitely going to give people a lot to think about. We'll be right back. The segment ended, but the debate lingered. A raw, unfiltered clash of conviction and perspective. What began as a routine interview had become something more profound, a reflection of the cultural tension between visibility and humility, speech and silence, performance and principle. Morgan Freeman hadn't exploded with anger but with truth, a truth that had been simmering for years. And Joy Behar, unwavering in her own beliefs, had stood her ground. Two worldviews had collided under the studio lights, leaving one undeniable takeaway: that sometimes the most powerful conversations are the ones that end in respectful disagreement.